broad region of storms impacting the Philippines on tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for January 11th. Right now we have no active tropical cyclones, but there are some areas of interest around the world at this time. You can see a big fleet of disturbances stretching from the western Indian Ocean through the Philippines into the western Pacific Ocean on the right hand side of your screen. First of all, the Atlantic though, 141 days until hurricane season starts again. There's really nothing to look at there, just a very long front extending almost from Puerto Rico all the way up through the North Atlantic right now. Very typical picture for January, a fairly quiet scene in the grand scheme of things. In the Western Pacific, we're up to 20% for this area of interest, a very broad one that's causing a lot of precipitation across the Philippines right now, and the centre of it is still very well off the shore and out over the Philippine Sea. To its southwest over the Indian Ocean, we're now running at a 50% chance in the next 5 days for this system that's going to develop fairly soon somewhere in the southwest Indian Ocean, and will probably start making a run for Madagascar and could become a significant cyclone down the line. We're still giving a 10% chance to another area of interest in the far eastern, or rather the South Pacific, very out at sea, not far from French Polynesia, could go on to affect the Austral Islands as a potential tropical cyclone, but a low chance given at this moment. Take a look at the rainfall expectations, or what's happened actually in the last 24 hours. Red zones show areas that have received large amounts of rainfall. You can see a few there across Indonesia and across the Philippines. Elsewhere, not so much, although a lot of rainfall occurring in Western Europe right now across the British Isles, moving through into Norway, and of course in the western part of the United States. So here's some latest satellite imagery then of this system. It's Invest 97W, that's the tag from the US Navy, and there it is right now. You can see several different areas of convective blowups, and maybe a little bit of rotation here and there, but the most prominent area right now is that one on the right hand side there that's reached the daylight first in those images, blowing up a decent amount of convection, although there's quite a few other shafts of it as well, extending all the way down to the Sulu Sea and towards Borneo, but right now the main area is that one on the right hand side as we wait for that satellite imagery to catch up. Blowing up quite nicely, and there is still a chance for it to become a tropical cyclone. It would be a very broad, disorganized one if it did manage to form, but it could get that center formed underneath that convective blowup in the next couple of days. It doesn't have a huge amount of time. Let's zoom in another level here just to show you those areas that are getting those high amounts of cloud cover and obviously rainfall underneath that. And these are areas we are concerned about for very high rainfall. Probably not going to see quite as much as we were forecasting in previous days, but you'll see on the model runs later on that we are still expecting quite a lot, potentially maximums up to 300 millimeters in addition to what we've already seen so far. But right now, clearly the eastern part there is the one to watch. Now looking on at the Indian Ocean, and you can see a flurry of activity in the southwest Indian Ocean. That one group of systems or storms particularly near the right hand side of the screen, well to the south of the Maldives there, that long chain of islands, and you can see it potentially getting a little bit more well developed, but it is going to be very slow to occur over the next few days, and I wouldn't expect to see quick expectations for cyclone genesis yet. It is still, on, according to most models, near the end of the 5-day period, and one or two still having reservations on whether it'll actually be that system or a different one. Here's the sea surface temperatures. Look out for temperatures of 80 degrees Fahrenheit or above generally for good tropical cyclone conditions. I'll read out the Celsius values. Across the Caribbean, 26 degrees generally, a few places getting close to 27. Of course, that's not really relevant. We're not expecting any tropical cyclones across the Atlantic, but you never know, just to keep you up to date with those numbers. The Arabian Sea, temperatures looking good there, especially in the deep tropics, 28 degrees. The Southwest Indian Ocean, a really important area, 28 to 29 degrees Celsius in the Mozambique Channel. In the open ocean itself, it's still 27 plus. Very good conditions for that potential cyclone. A bit of a gap in the southeastern part of the Indian Ocean there of cooler waters, but in the deep tropics, the spawning point, it's still looking very good, 27 degrees or more. In the Australian region, those temperatures are very high. The Gulf of Carpentaria, 29 easily, probably over 30 actually. And in the South Pacific, temperature looking good as well. Anywhere north of Fiji and New Caledonia, very good conditions. And even south of there as well to an extent. 28 degrees the minimum there, pushing 30 degrees near Vanuatu. In the Western Pacific, temperatures remain good as well. 28 degrees at 10 degrees north, extending all the way through to the Philippines almost. A little bit cooler actually off there. But it is still above average. And this is the sea surface temperature anomalies. Blues below average, yellows are above, and you'll note that there's still a very cool pool in relative terms off the coast of Australia that's affecting a much larger area now actually. Still warm temperatures, don't be fooled, but it is well below average. La Nina effect still there, but still breaking up it seems, and the Atlantic is above average for what it's worth right now. Oceanic heat content is still looking good for parts of the South Pacific, extending a little bit further into the Coral Sea right now as well. They'll reach their peak around late February probably. And in the North Pacific, the Western Pacific particularly, you can see those decent hues into the greens there. That's certainly good enough for significant tropical cyclone development. And if that system pushes northwestwards a little bit, it might get a bit more of a chance as well. Well, this is the GFS computer model for the next few days, and what are we expecting? Well, not a huge amount. There is still that chance that it could end up becoming a tropical cyclone. It would be a very brief spin up. It would have to tighten up a lot more compared to what it's doing right now within that very broad low pressure area that's really affecting the whole southern part of the Philippines, not just the coastal area on the east side. It is a large area that's being affected by that broad low. Looking out for this Southwest Indian Ocean cyclone, you'll see it brewing near the top right hand side, but the GFS is again cautious on it. The rotation increases there on day 3, and by day 4, day 5, there it is starting to really become a tropical cyclone, and there it is on day 5, strengthening quickly actually and getting towards hurricane equivalent status. It's just going to take a while before that we get to that stage, as it potentially battles off with another low pressure system that you can actually see it doing a little waltz with there, spiraling around. Interesting. This is the South Pacific region. Look out near Fiji on the left hand side and near French Polynesia on the right. Those two potential cyclones, the very low chances on both of them, and they'll have very short windows to actually reach tropical cyclone status before being pulled away by a front and turning extratropical. You'll see it once again there, particularly the one on the right. That probably has the highest chance, certainly according to our analyst team who have marked that 10% compared to 0 on the left hand side. So keep watching that one. And this is the Mediterranean, and the GFS thinks that there's going to be a tropical cyclone just to the west of Cyprus within 5 days, forms on day 3, and then by the time we get to day 5, look at that, sweeping by the western coast near Paphos and then continuing northwards towards the coast of Turkey. Well, that is really interesting. No other models are really on board with that yet, although the ECMWF and the ICON do have surface lows, just not as aggressive as the GFS. Woo, well, imagine if we saw that. And this is the Philippines over the next 5 days. Those red areas, that's where we're expecting rainfall amounts of possibly 300 millimeters in addition to what we've already seen. But you'll note now that those pink areas, the areas that are getting huge amounts, more than double that probably, 600 millimeters, is staying offshore. Whether that continues to be the case, it's trending that way, so that's some good news. But in general, we are still looking at significant areas there getting 300 millimeters. Northern Mindanao, Leyte, and eastern Samar, and for part of Catanduanes and Sorsogon province possibly, you are looking at maybe up towards 300 millimeters. So let's check the longer range, day 5 through 10. This cyclone really takes up its mantle, you could say, as it moves southwestwards, becomes one of its own, and becomes an extremely powerful cyclone there, category 4 at least, and very large, completely usurping the energy of that other potential tropical system, and then it continues southwestwards. Enormous wind field affecting Mauritius and Réunion, even though it's not far from making landfall in Madagascar. And actually the hurricane force winds don't affect any land areas, so that would be a good case scenario if we saw that come to fruition. In the longer range as well, this is the Pacific. You can see two little systems passing by Fiji there, both of those could form, and then this one in the Coral Sea that becomes a hurricane equivalent storm as well. Has its beginnings along the coastline there in Queensland if you look carefully, and then starts to move northwards at first and then turns eastwards. There it is, becoming a tropical cyclone on the 19th, that's just 8 days away, and then it starts to southeastwards. That's the serious stuff done. You can scan the barcode and take a look at the Force 13 merch store where we have all of our usual items, and you can request full season and individual animations bespoke, made to your liking. And are still waiting for Hone t-shirts are flying out like hotcakes, or Hotsons or something like that. In the Scilly range, this is what's left of that system. Very powerful cyclone, turns to the southeast. You know, that wouldn't be such a bad case scenario if it did get that strong, that it does slot its way through those islands, and it is tropical storm force winds for all. Of course, it could get much worse than that, or we'd rather have no storm at all. But realistically, it looks like we are going to get a significant cyclone out of this, particularly when we get into next week. So we're going to have to be ready and waiting for that one to form. Coral Sea, this system develops further as well, and this gets a little bit more likely too as it's getting a little bit closer, but category 2 peak there, maybe bordering category 3, and that also doesn't affect land once it gets going, and continues southeastwards away from any of those land areas. It's just the initial part of that storm's track that I'm concerned about, not least because it's the closest to today, but also because it could be a rain event for the eastern coast of Queensland there as it starts to form. But once it's out and going, it may be the 2022 Atlantic hurricane season. What might have been looks like this. These are all the names that we may or may not. So the 2022 Atlantic What Might Have Been is on its way Friday night. You don't want to miss it on the Force 13 channel. Then what happened on this day? It was January the 11th, 1988 that we had a very powerful Category 5 Cyclone Anne, which was making a brief Category 5 peak just to the west of Vanuatu. So a very interesting picture there. Storm was gradually moving southwestwards, and it would start weakening from here on out. Aggie was a very erratic storm track that was influenced by Anne, moving northwestwards towards Papua New Guinea, and was going to do a U-turn, hairpin turn, back towards the southeast. Roy was also a strong Category 3 in the Western Pacific as well, we can't forget about that one. So a very active picture on this day in 1988, 35 years ago. Well, back to this year, and in the Atlantic, the first name on this year's naming list is Arlene. In the Eastern Pacific, it will be Adrian, and in the Central Pacific, if we get any this year, it'll be Hone. In the Western Pacific, our next name now is Sanvu, followed by Mawar, and in the North Indian Ocean, we're looking out for Mocha. And in case you're wondering the following name after that, it's Biparjoy. Down into the southwest Indian Ocean, the next name is Chiniso, the Australian region, Freddie, and in the South Pacific it's Irene. That's all from tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow night.